Hello, hello, people. It's lovely to see you all chilling out in the chat on the right. Oh, forgot to add one thing. Let's see. I'm gonna add like a little color box behind it. Let's see. Because I keep saying I want to do that, but ugh. There we go. Now we just need to drag it down here and do a little bit of this, do a little bit of that. There we go. That looks nice. That looks nice. Yeah, hope everyone is doing well. Adam, is that like you replying to like me asking if you're doing well? Instead of the courtesy answer, just like, yeah, I'm doing good. How are you? You're just like straight up, no. How about you? Add Joe Johnson. That makes more sense. Oh, wait. I still had it on top chat, so I might have missed it. Dang it. Never mind. I hope that everyone's doing well. How's everyone's Wednesday been? Mine has been pretty good. Pretty good. On the grind. So yeah, this week has been pretty busy. What have I been up to? It's been pretty chaotic in the evenings, honestly. So coming back from work, I have done like a couple mentorships. We have like a couple meetings in the afternoon, or like in the evening. Yeah, so we're really starting to get like traction on the book that we're working on. Now it just comes to like, honestly, like the most boring part of the whole thing, and it's basically looking at like all the text that I've ever done, correcting what needs correcting, and then like updating the stuff that needs updating, and also spell checking and all that kind of stuff. So it's gonna take a while. Gonna take a while. And then after that, I have to do all the images as well. But yeah, I mean, that's gonna be like a little bit of a lengthy process, but we're making good progress on it. Same for the course as well. I've added like 4 new lessons to the course, which I'll show it off actually. I have not showed this ever, so I might as well do it. Or maybe I have showed it at a certain point, but I'm not sure. Let's have a look. Let's just do it like this. Got thrown an ad. What's up with the team challenges on the BE Discord? We will talk about that in a minute because we do have an update for that as well. So let's have a look here. I am gonna share this first. So let's see, which one is it? I wanted to give like a quick overview of where we are at with the cores that we're building. So for most people, this is going to be like really new, but this is basically the way that the course is going to work. We're gonna be changing up a lot on this, so keep that in mind as well. Everything is like really early progress, but yeah, I just wanted to kind of show it off. So we have like a bunch of people working on like the individual lessons here, and then all these lessons they kind of end up at like a specialization, right? But yeah, we've been making some good progress. Some of them are like in really good state, so that's why they have like the little green button next to them. And currently all the yellow ones are being worked on. So I would say we're about like 50% of the way with like people actually working on like the different lessons. So yeah, it's gonna take a little bit longer, but we're making really good progress on it so far. Yeah, everything that you see here goes through like multiple rounds of like feedback and scrutiny and yeah, just weekly reviews going through everything. So oh great. This is a good example. Why is that happening? What? Okay. Live demo. Is it happening? No, it's not happening on everyone. That's weird. So every lesson is basically gonna be like theoretics, right? So like a lot of theoretical stuff here. And then the actual plan for the future is that we then build video content on top of that as well. But we want to start out with the written content because that's going to be the bulk of the content, and then the video content is going to be a little bit more interactive. So yeah, it is indeed the course that we're making. So yeah, every lesson in the course is going to have like a section about like the theoretics behind it. This one talks about like unwrapping, how you need to unwrap, what you need to keep in mind, all that kind of stuff. And then at the end of it, there's a couple of exercises with like additional resources for you to check out as well. As you can see, very early progress, but making some really good progress on this. So yeah, all these lessons are kind of going to be following like the same sort of template with like the lesson itself, a couple of exercises, and then additional resources for you to check out as well. Yeah, I just wanted to show that off really quickly. Just a sneak peek. Dennis is saying it looks like a passive skill tree in like an RPG game. Yeah, it does, right? It does. It was like a big inspiration of it as well, because I think honestly, there's a lot of courses out there, right? And there's a lot of resources, especially out there. But what I think is missing is not so much on like the courses side, right? Because the courses they give you like a chosen track, but they don't give you like the flexibility that we want to go for. But when you're like self-thought, then the issue becomes finding the good ones, right? Like finding the good resources and being able to figure out like where you start or like where you are at this stage and then how you need to progress further along. So that's what we're really trying to embody with this sort of course, is that you can, it's probably going to open up with like, I don't know, you can decide where you want to start yourself, or maybe we have like a little bit of a questionnaire in the beginning. Not sure yet. But something like that to get you started, and then you can just like dive into the course yourself and then pick your own path that you wanna go into. This is a bit more orientated towards AAA, right? Because in AAA you really have to specialize. But I don't think we're gonna miss out on having good resources for like indie or AA too. Because you're still learning like the same kind of stuff, right? You're probably gonna go less deep into those resources. Yeah, I just wanted to show that off really quickly. Just a little sneak peek for all of you supporting the work that we do. So that is awesome. Got a bunch of people flooding in as well. I love bees. Sulan, hey. Good to see you both. Play Coffee, Helena. Yeah, it is the course that one that we're making. I don't think I've seen this before. No, I think we might have shown it off like once or twice, like very early concepts, but I don't know. Luke is saying when you're teaching yourself, it really takes a lot of discovery to figure out what resources you should trust. There's a million videos out there, but it's hard to figure out which one is current or good. Yeah, exactly. That's the whole issue, right? Like, there are really good videos out there. It's just at that stage, you, for one, have to filter through all of it, right? Yourself. But also, at that stage, you don't know what is good, right? So you have to rely on someone else at that point to then figure out, like, hey, what is good and how is this going to link together to like other parts, right? But yeah. Going straight to demo, no announcement trailer, no teaser trailer, straight to live demo ahead of Gamescom, only at Beyond Extend. Hell yeah. I mean, it's not... it's going to be a while before it's out, but yeah. Is this going to be paid or included in the membership? This will most likely be a new tier in the membership. But, I mean, I still need to think about how we're going to do this, right? But what I want to do is some of the things that we already have going, I want to implement those into the system as well, right? So for example, if you want to do the course, you're also going to get access to like all the workshops, all the videos from the workshops. And then potentially, depending on the tier system that we're going to be doing, I also want you to have access to either mentorships or like lessons or something like that. We're probably going to start out with mentorships, right? Like one session a month or something like that to just keep you on track. But we'll see. Because it highly depends, right? Like some people are like really comfortable with just like, hey, I'm going to learn by myself. I don't necessarily want a mentorship just yet. So getting started with that is probably going to be like, I don't know, like a self-guided track, right? And then you have like the guided track. That's going to be a bit more expensive because then you have people mentoring you along the side. But yeah, that's all stuff that I need to figure out still. And what the price is going to be and all that kind of stuff. But I'll keep you all in the loop. Then, Olaf was actually asking about the team challenges that were going to happen. We actually have our meeting set for that tomorrow to talk about it. This is going to be the second meeting with some of the new people. We unfortunately have one of the people from the organization already drop out. And this was Ricardo that joined us like the last team challenge and like helped us during that team challenge. So unfortunately, he just has like too many plates spinning at the same time. So he's gonna take a break from this, and he's gonna be focusing on other stuff as well. So we're probably gonna be looking for a new person to help us, dedicated person to help us on the team challenges. But I'll make a post about that in a while. But that doesn't really change the plans that we have though. So the plan currently is still to do a team challenge in the end of the year. So it would be October, November, around that time. We're still planning for a team challenge to happen at that point. So it kind of would be like a little winter team challenge or something like that. That's how I found BE. Oh, that's awesome, Luke. That is awesome. So yeah, that's been going on as well. Let's see. So we have the book, we have the team challenges update. Yeah, I think that's about it. Otherwise, the mentorships are going good. We need to do like a little bit more promotion on that side, but I think for that we're good. So if you are interested in grabbing like a single session or like a mentorship, feel free to check out the announcements in the announcement channel as well. Maybe time for me to sign up this time. Finally, maybe. Oh, Adam. I'm gonna keep you to it. I'm gonna ignore the finally maybe, you know? Like, I'm just gonna completely ignore it. But yeah, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun. Talking about fun, let's switch it on over to Wip Wednesday. So, for people that are new here, Wip Wednesday is a weekly event that I run every Wednesday. Why it's in the name. Where I go through like community work. Like people can tag their work to get feedback from myself. And then we'll go live on stream and we'll talk about some feedback. So let's switch it on up. Let's see. Let's take this one instead. Solo team like Scott? No. We'll allow you like a couple of people, you know? We'll allow you a couple of people. Okay. So the way that this works is I'm going to be looking at the Discord as well, because there's usually like a bunch of context that I want to get. And as you can see, I'll bring it up really quick. This is just like our Discord where people can just post their work. And then you can get like feedback on that as well. It might be my PTSD from academia kicking in, but have you ever thought about streamlining learning courses? Have you ever thought streamlining learning and courses causes predictability in people's work? Kind of lose the creativity when everyone is showing the same or similar work? It's just something that I'm picking up on when studying. Well, to be honest, like you're going into an industry, right? So there needs to be some sort of predictability in the whole thing, because you're a commercial artist, right? You're not an artist that is like fully reliant on like 100% creativity, because that doesn't really serve the purpose of the end goal of this industry, right? So it's not like you're reliant on, I don't know, making like crazy paintings or doing something full creative, because you still need to fit into a mold somehow, right? It kind of gets a little bit less predictable once you go into like the indie sphere, I guess. But you're still using the same sort of programs and all the workflows and all that stuff. You're just applying them in a different way. There's still enough space to kind of individualize yourself though. I think the real issue to me is that in the beginning, everyone kind of has to learn like all the technical things, right? So all the programs, all the workflows, all the things that you need to learn. And then the issue with that is that you're so focused on all the technicalities of things that it kind of just like gets rid of like the creativity that you had in the first place for a while. But what a lot of people struggle with is then rediscovering that creativity once you have all the workflows and all the programs down. I think that's where it becomes your job to get back into that, right? Because there's still a lot of people that go through academia and they kind of have made a portfolio that kind of works for getting them into the industry, right? But I think it's way more valuable to then show your creativity on top of that. Creativity doesn't come from me. I'm just a tool for others' creativity. Would it be better to balance out showcasing you can fit in the work environment but still offering something new to the table? Well, yeah, I think people still want to know that you can do all the technicalities, right? But do them in your own way. So what that meant for me, for example, was that I only wanted to make environments. I never had an interest in like making singular assets, and I just wanted to make like worlds, right? At a certain point, I wasn't ready for that, but I was still doing it because I was like, that's my thing. That's what I want to do. Like I was doing that when I was drawing, and I just took all that passion into 3D. So yeah, you can still make it your own. On top of that, you just have to find what that is, right? So I think it's not necessarily a case where you need to balance out showcasing that you fit into a work environment. I feel in that case, you just make the work that you're passionate about, and then work is going to come your way. Of course, there is a curve there, right? Because if you make like really unique, like really non-practical 3D stuff, yeah, it's going to be less likely that you're going to have a job. So there is a curve there somewhere. Yeah. Let's dive into some feedback. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat and I'll interweave them into the conversation. That would be cool to talk about. First one off, we have Anton. Anton is making a pub house. There's a couple of questions in here. What about if your thing is the technical stuff itself? Then you become a technical artist. Pretty simple. There is a dedicated job for that. You might honestly have it easier than if you wanted to become an artist then. Oh shit, I had a little black bar here, so I need to make sure that everything is like in frame now. Okay. So Anton is asking a couple of questions here. I will add trees and bushes on the foreground, but I think I'll think a little bit more about what's the best way to build it. Okay, so straight up for foliage and trees, use mega scans. Just straight up save yourself the hassle and just use mega scans or something like that. Because you're already focusing on the house itself. This is the focal point, right? This is the focus of the whole project, not even for the composition, right? The rest of it becomes secondary to the whole project. So I would honestly just use mega scans for all this stuff. If you want to go into foliage creation, do that in a separate project, right? Because that is literally going to cut down the timeline for this project in half. The first question here is though, I decided to make a roof at displaced plane using a height map for my roof texture. Is it a good way to create interesting shapes of the roof, or is it always better to make every single tile separate than placing them by hand? No, I think having it as a plane also makes it way easier to reduce it afterwards, right? Because you deform your plane according to the tileable. And then if you don't need that geometry again, you can just get rid of all the geometry, retain the silhouettes, and then you still have your tileable there, right? So I think when it comes to your approach where it's a tileable to a roof, that works fine. The other question is, for now, all the wood beams don't look believable. It's a good idea to add more loops and move the beams, introduce deformation. Yeah. Or I need to add more contracts to my texture. You need to do both. So for the beams, you need to add a deformation, which is oftentimes what I call adding character to it, right? Because you're no longer working with just like straight 3D beams. You're giving them like little bits of offsets and you're making them like more interesting to look at, right? So take this guy over here, and instead of having it just like really straight, it would be nice to just add like a little bit of like a curve into it, right? So that at least this building gets like a little bit of character. Now you can do the same thing with these guys as well. And how far you go with that, that's up to you, right? I'm just adding like an example here. You could easily just add like a lot of like really nice looking edges here. That's what I call like the character pass, right? The same thing that you're doing on your roof, where you kind of have this like nice looking curve. That's what I kind of want to see on most of it then. Especially on the silhouette, right? Because the silhouette has the most impact on the way that we perceive this building. So doing it on like the outer edges is going to give you like the most value. So you want to have deformations, and then also, yeah, look at the reference that you have here, right? Like look at this wooden beam, and then also to improve your textures, you need to look at real life ref. Super important. You cannot only rely on a concept. You have to look at a real life reference to get better at recreating real life things, right? So this concept is great, but what I actually want to see when people take a concept like this is like, okay, wooden beams, right? So this wooden beam is something like this. And then you have like your reference breakdown here. And then the tiles, they look like this. And then the plaster kind of looks like this. You know what I'm saying? Like you're trying to like break down everything into like its original material. And that's where like real life reference comes in. Super, super, super important. Whenever you have a question like this, where you're like, I don't know if my wood looks good enough, that means that you don't have like, you've not internalized what good wood looks like yet, right? That's no issue, right? Like I use references on a daily basis, right? If I'm stuck, if I don't know what something looks like, I'm gonna look it up myself as well. It's a part of growing our visual library, right? Because the more that we look at stuff, the more that we internalize it, and then can use that in our next project. Right? So use references for that. That's going to help you a lot. And then I'd like to hear your thoughts about how it's going, because maybe I'm missing something and I need to pay attention to something. You can advise. I would honestly say that like this little thing here, the real life reference is going to be like the most important thing that I can say. Because there is already like a big amount of improvement that you can do just on the textures of the roof itself. So I would look at individual textures. You wanna make it super small. The work that you have to do, right? Let me rephrase that. The work that you have to do, you want to make that super small and super achievable. Where you can be like, hey, today I'm just gonna focus on this roof texture and I'm gonna improve the look of it. Right? So texture improvements, really important. I can already see that you can do that on the roof itself and then the plaster itself as well. Again, that's where real life textures or the real life references come in, right? Luke saying PureRef project boards are life changing. Yeah. Collect it all in like one PureRef board, have all the images there. For example, I don't want to make it too long, but I'll show you what like my reference board looks like, right, for my medieval project, just to give you an idea as well. But yeah, while that is loading up, that's the main thing that I would focus on. Just make sure that you have like enough reference. Cut yourself a bunch of time by not focusing on the things that aren't worth focusing on just yet. Like for example, the foliage, right? I would not even touch that with like a 10-foot pole if you're already having minor hiccups with the texturing of the wooden planks, right? Just stick to the building, keep it simple and keep it focused on the building. And then whenever you need trees or you need like textures for the floor or something like that, look into Megascans or whatever you can find online, right? Make it really simple on yourself. You gotta look at your portfolio as like a collection of projects, not just a single project that you're gonna showcase everything in. Try to split them up in terms of like the skills that you want to improve, and then push those forward step by step. Lastly, let me showcase my. Wait, what? Oh, okay. Here we go. So as you can see, this is for my medieval scene, and I have a ton of reference, right? Very specific things, like what does like a roof look like, right? Like we have the top, like we can see here, but also the bottom of the roof as well, right? And how is the roof made up? Like these are like all individual slats to make a roof. How are they produced, right? All the information that I could need is all in here, right? So you just need to set that up for yourself, and ideally make it way smaller than I did, right? Because this is for my entire medieval scene. What you want to have is probably like, hey, for your house, again, a couple, let me see if I actually have them. Those are like texture references. We've got buildings here. For example, this stuff, right? Okay, what does an actual wall look like? Because the better you understand what the thing is that you're trying to make, the easier the easier it is going to be for you to actually make it then, right? So oh yeah, you do have another update. I would honestly say that the study we talked about is still applies here, Anton. The texture just doesn't look really believable yet, right? So have a look at those references. Keep those in mind. I'm going to show you the latest picture here as well. But like the study we talked about, like still applies. I like what you're doing with the moss though. The moss adds like a nice little breakup into it as well. But yeah, it's going to be important to have a look at those real references because there's a lot of information that's still missing here. Especially from like the normal map. I don't know why it feels so flat, but it almost feels like there's no normal on it. So that might be something to look into as well. Cool. But yeah, thanks for sharing your work, Anton. Just keep it simple for yourself. Astronaut, a question is how to break into the industry if you have no experience and you were a dropout. Make good work. Make good work and companies will hire you at a certain point. It is pretty simple. It's just really difficult to do so. Like a good thing to look at is decide what your specialization is. Look at people that are in that specialization currently, and then look at the portfolios that they have. Ideally, they should be like junior, right? So that you have like a more accurate point, and try to recreate what they have or recreate the quality bar that they have set. Thanks, Anton. Got it. Thank you so much. No worries. Happy to help. There's a lovely conversation going on. Let me see if I can catch up here. Literally, all my notes are about functions and how 3D works in the backend, not about art. Yeah, you can become a tech artist as a beginner. Yeah, location definitely matters, right? I think as a game dev in general, you have to be willing to move. If you don't want to move, unfortunately, it's going to really restrict like the amount of options you're going to have to yourself, especially if you live in a country where game dev wasn't a big thing, right? I'm from Belgium myself, right? Belgium has become like a little bit more well known because of Larian Studios, right, with Baldur's Gate. But other than that studio, there's not much there. So I can remain in Belgium, but then my realistic options would be architectural visualization or working in like a small game studio or starting one myself. So yeah, that's definitely a restriction that you have to keep in mind. Important to remember that the industry is in a rough place overall, but doesn't mean that there aren't any jobs. Yeah. I've seen multiple juniors join the industry in the last weeks, right? Not even months, the weeks. Why is that? Why is that if games are booming right now, or are games dying too? No, games are not going anywhere. Like the thing that is currently happening, I think, is that it's shifting from really massive AAA studios because they've realized that it's like unsustainable in the long term, and companies are looking at ways to go back to, well, from like a business perspective, they're trying to go back to a point where you can put less people and less budget on things that make more money, right? Which, from like a bigger scope, makes sense why a lot of them were chasing the live service aspect, right? But the thing that was still a bit missing there is that they were still pumping in so much money into it, where like some of the more successful ones, they weren't necessarily made by like bigger companies, right? Or you have indie hits that just make like bigger margins because they have less people working on it. Good reference boards are so satisfying. Yeah, they really are. Real resources, even for stylized art. I'm also afraid that everyone has the same references and your work is becoming uniform. No, I don't think so. Like that should not be an issue at all. Because honestly, reference hunting on the internet is becoming like really shit at the moment. Like it's becoming really ridiculous to find really good references because we're going through like a weird phase where like AI and all that kind of stuff is coming in, and it's honestly making our work like way harder. That also means that artists need to dig deeper to find actual good resources, which also means that people are going to be more spread out in the resources that they find. So yeah. Du-du-du. Let's have a look. It's always going to be an interpretation. Even games using megascans can look significantly different from one another with good art direction. Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. If you see the same assets in games and foliages, yeah. So I'm gonna post a different question. Where we are artists, right? So we obviously care about this stuff, but do people that play games care about this? Because I don't think so. Like they don't care that they can recognize like a megascan tree in one game and then see it in another one. If it was to the point where like, oh, everyone is only using this one pack, yeah, that would be an issue. But we're not going there. Yeah. When I see things that most people do not see, no, I think it's just because we're so biased towards it, right? Like this is what we do for a living, so of course we're gonna see it. But this is questioning my vision, deeply my vision of this industry. It shouldn't though. Doesn't really matter that much. Like there's still gonna be a need for assets and visuals and all that kind of stuff. So is it true that there are no longer junior entry positions, or that junior artists are expecting to be as good as seniors but maybe a bit slower? Um no, there are definitely junior entry positions for sure. I mean, I work with a good amount of juniors that have started their first job, right? So there definitely are there. They are a little bit more scattered and a little bit less um a little bit less common now, right? Because we've just gone through like a massive shakeup. But yeah, let's see. What was the second part of that question? Oh yeah, but junior artists are expecting to be as good as seniors, but maybe a bit slower. So that kind of goes hand in hand with the first question that you had, right? Where now, because so many people are trying to get in, and the amount of um the amount of the amount of people that are applying for jobs also means that the bar is going to be higher, right? And the same thing as well with like ArtStation, like making it like way easier to find people. That also makes that the bar is higher, right? So yeah, there's definitely something there. I It's interesting when you say the comparison between juniors and seniors, because for me, what makes someone a senior is that they have had experience with the creation of games, and they can anticipate things that might go wrong or might become an issue in the future, and they can see those things coming. Right? So for example, my experience that I've had with previous games gives me way better insight of what we can expect in the future, compared to a junior artist that hasn't gone through like a couple of cycles of games, right? So yeah. But yeah, like in terms of like artistic qualities, the bar is definitely higher though, for sure. Not as high as like what you would expect like from a senior, right? But it's definitely higher. Oh yeah, video games are definitely like flavors. Like you have Call of Duty and you have Stardew Valley, right? Like you have those in the same sphere, right? They're both video games, but they're completely different. And people do have like different sensitivities for sure, but there is going to be like a commonality between them, right? Like if you're playing like a really beautiful game but like the gameplay sucks, it's very likely that you are not gonna keep playing, compared to otherwise where you have like a really good game that is like really satisfying to play, but it looks like a bit dated or whatever. Like most people are going to be like, but it doesn't matter because I still like the game. Does that mean that if you are like a graphic oriented person that is you? Not necessarily. I've also never played Final Fantasy for that reason, because I can't stand the fonts that they use. Very simple. Right? It might be that one thing that I can't take. Let's continue to have a look. So next one we have from Mr. G. Mr. G would like to know, how does a scene look and feel? Does it give you more of a closed-in isolation look? Should I add characters to the scene? Oh. Oh, here we go. So number one, the feel. It feels way better than it does before. I think the lighting that you have right now is also like really nicely centered along this point, and we can basically barely see anything around here, which really plays into like the dark, like claustrophobic atmosphere that we were talking about before, right? Same thing here, where it's kind of just like pushing all the values towards like the center, right? Which works really nice, because now we're focusing on a thing that makes sense here, right? Yeah, like Justin is also saying, like the relighting in this scene, it looks more refined compared to what we first saw as well. Yeah, for example. So yeah, it feels really good, way better than it did before. So yeah, just give you a little heart. I like it. Oh my god, that's a shitty looking heart. It's more like a bird. Okay, we're gonna deal with it. Oh, let me actually make sure that you can see the shitty bird on stream. Should I add characters to the scene? I'm thinking about adding a few. Oh my god, I think Discord might have fucked up on that one. I was thinking of adding a few more areas of interest, I think. One being a futuristic laptop sitting on the floor, but is there anything that I can add to the screen that I can use as an area of focus? My worry is that the scene might be too plain. I don't think the scene is too plain. You just have to... What I really like is that the scene currently is like really simple. I think you might have to do like some color balancing, right? And like some lighting balancing, especially, where you can maybe like make the center even a little bit more intense than it currently is. To give you like a quick thing of what that might mean is watch. There we go. Right, so I'm just gonna quickly right, so making the center like stand out even more than it currently does, because you really want to feel that center, right? Especially with the light coming from above. Maybe let's reduce this guy. Right, so we really want to make it feel like the light is coming from above, right? I think that's gonna be really nice. I think where you have the feeling of it feeling like a little bit too open or like a little bit too empty, you could add like other things to the scene, like you're saying, right? Like maybe a laptop on the floor that's running like diagnostics or something like that. Let's say I don't know, you have like a little laptop that's running like diagnostics on like the main sphere, and then maybe I don't know, you can do something cool with the storytelling here where the laptop can have on the screen there might be something like it's you can see that it's like running diagnostics, right? With like a little loading bar, and then maybe it could have like a hint of I don't know, the logo of like the company behind it or something like that on the desktop, right? You can make it like interesting and kind of fancy, right? And then if you wanted to add characters to it, you could. That's more up to you and what kind of characters you find that like are really good for this sort of environment, right? So I would not necessarily stop you from doing that. You just have to find the ones that are like, yes, they're on point. And making sure that they're high quality enough, right? The characters could be nice. Especially the plain orb, don't add details to it. Yeah, I would leave the orb alone for sure. The plain, yeah, exactly like Hudson is saying, the plain look makes it look like alien, right? Could probably push the noisiness around, having the sphere be pristine and undisturbed, making the area of rest. Yeah. Yeah. A little bit of storytelling here. You could honestly have like a couple of people, like maybe one or two people like here in the back, right? If you're gonna go with characters. And then maybe have like a person, I don't know, sitting at the laptop. You could kind of use people as like a foreground and like a background element to kind of work with your composition, right? Because you obviously don't want to put them here, right? That makes sense. You kind of want to keep it like pretty clean so that there might be like some scientists that are like looking in or something like that. right? And having them in the background also gives you like more leeway with how good they need to look, because yeah, they're not going to be the center of attention, right? So that could actually work in your favor as well. Yeah, feel free to come up with what you want to do. My worry is that the scene might be too plain, and due to the lighting, it will hide some of the modeling details on the props that I model. Yeah, but this is one of those cases where you never want to sacrifice the way that a scene feels to show off the modeling that you've done, right? I know that that's like very tempting, but you should look at them in like two separate ways, right? The scene by itself is the scene, right? It's not meant to be a modeling showcase. It's the scene where you have like the mood and the story and all that kind of stuff. It's about the bigger picture. Then, if you're doing like a breakdown of your individual assets, that's where you can shine a light on them separately, right? So that shows off two separate kind of skill sets, right? Because you have the one where you are a visual storyteller, where this is the scene where you tell a story and you make the story work. And then the second part is where you do the breakdown, and then it becomes more about the technical aspects of it, right? Showcasing the execution, the texturing, modeling, all that kind of stuff. Two separate things, but try to keep them separate wherever you can. Like, don't try to sacrifice one thing for the other, right? Because that's where it usually goes wrong. Because you want to showcase art and the technical separately. Right? Very important to keep in mind, because otherwise you might end up with a scene that's just like way too bright because you wanted to showcase things, right? I also need a few more areas of focus for the fly through. You honestly don't need like a complex fly through for this. Again, like, think about the story that you're trying to tell, right? What do you want to showcase with a fly through? Like with a fly through here, I'm imagining that you are one of the scientists standing in the crowd and you're watching this sphere like maybe slowly bob up and down, and there's like some noises in the background or something like that that might indicate that there's like, I don't know, server rooms or stuff like that, right? But keep it very subtle, right? Because it goes back to the story, right? Like, what are you trying to say? If you're then gonna do like a fly through for fly through reasons, that's not good. You want to make sure that a fly through makes sense for the thing that you're trying to show off. So yeah, I wouldn't make a fly through. Honestly, for this, if you don't have a fly through, it would not necessarily mean that you're like losing any points, right? Because this scene, it doesn't really have that many moving elements or like, yeah, movable things anyway. So think about it. Is a fly through necessary? And if you are going to make one, think about how. Separate the storytelling and the breakdown like two different contributions on ArtStation? No, not for a scene like this. Have it separate, as in like your post, right? So in the beginning, you have like all the really cool shots. So main shot, maybe a detail shot, all that kind of stuff. And then you have a breakdown underneath it, right? Cheesy question. How do I know when I'm ready to make a piece? That's what's always holding me back. I don't know vertex painting in a landscape material. So it's a good question. But you need to start out with like the skill sets that you need to make the piece that you want to make, right? Because now when you say like, hey, I want to make a project, that project can mean anything from like a full forest to like a desert environment, and they're going to have like completely different implications on what you need to focus on, right? I would always try to cater a piece to what you are comfortable with, plus a little bit of a challenge on top so that you can push your skill set by making that piece, right? That's the way that I would look at it. And if through the process you learned like, hey, I realized I wasn't ready for that. Think about that, right? Sit down with yourself and like think about it for a couple of hours and break down why it didn't work. And not because, oh, there's this concept called like the 5 whys, right? Where you ask yourself like, why 5 times to get to the truth of the matter, right? Because what might happen is that you're like, oh, why didn't I finish it? Oh, I wasn't motivated. But that's not gonna help you, right? Why weren't you motivated? Right? And keep asking those questions until you have something that you can actually work on improving. Because, for example, with vertex painting and landscape materials, if you want to build a scene that doesn't have a landscape in it, then you don't need a landscape material. Right? So yeah. Start small and just continue your way up. Yeah, thanks, Mr. G. Like other people have mentioned in the chat as well, very cool progression. I love the mood that you have going on. So yeah, it's really, really nice to see the progression on that. That's awesome. Let's see. Plamen is working on a Norse village. I'm now creating a rock kit for cliffs, and I was wondering if there's any good resources on explaining the workflow for it in the engine. So that means that we're probably not going to be discussing it here. But so a workflow for cliffs is look at the name Casper Wermuth. Look at that name. He has a tutorial called, oh god, what is the tutorial called again? RGB masking for cliffs or something like that. But have a look at this name. He has a good tutorial on that. It is paid though, but that's gonna teach you all you need to know for making cliffs. Cliffs, bigger rocks, anything like that. The gist of it basically comes down to you're baking down a normal map, but that normal map by itself is not going to have enough resolution to make it look like really high detailed and crisp, right? So what you would need to do on top of that is have RGB masking, right? Which is a way of packing multiple masks in a singular texture, right? In each channel of the RGB mask. And then, oh, sorry, I realized you couldn't see this. And then you can use those masks to then tile additional normal masks, like normal maps that are usually tiling on top of that, right? I know, very quick explanation here, but you don't want to do them unique. You have to do like some other ways to add on top of it. Hello, Wipes. I'll definitely check it out. Yeah. Honestly, there might be like other free videos out there as well. Oftentimes, this is the technique that they refer to. Right, so these two are like the techniques that you want to be looking into, or like the workflow. One thing that confuses me about this workflow is that the textile density of the rock, I'm aiming for 512. Shit, I realized that I was muted again. Dang it. So yeah, I'm aiming for 512 per meter. I know that I have to bake the rock normal from the high poly and then apply. Oh yeah, so sorry, I didn't read far enough. However, as some rocks will be huge, this means that they still have to hit 512 per meter. Is there a possibility that this textile density won't be achievable for some rocks? Yeah. So that's the case here, right? The normal map that you're going to be using is not necessarily the only thing that you'll be using to hit textile density. So it's more for like the bigger edges, and then those tileable normal maps that you're going to add on top of it, they're going to give you that resolution, right? How many different normal maps am I allowed to make for the whole rock kit? So this highly depends on the potential reuse of your environment, right? Because let's say I'm gonna go over the top, right? So let's say you have like 40 different normal map textures. You're not going to use them on a single rock, right? But let's say for the entire kit, you're using like 40 normal map textures to go fucking crazy, right? If you use them in another part of your environment, so if they're reused, then that's good, right? Because we're getting a lot more mileage out of the amount of textures that we're adding into it. If they are not reused and they're unique, then that's bad. Right? So you kind of have to think about it that way. It's about managing resources and trying to share as many resources that you can between things that you have in your scene, right? In your case, to keep it really simple, right? I know that we had like a number 40 here. That is nuts. Do not do that. You would honestly need like maybe 2 tileable textures or something like that. Realistic number is 2, right? For like a whole cliff. Oh, yeah, that's actually a good point. Shout out to Cairo. He does have some good stuff. And there's also, now that I'm thinking about it, shit, what's his name? Cairo, good brand. Oh god. Yeah, doesn't fit. Yeah, thanks for that, Giovanni. That is awesome. Cool. Yeah, looking good so far though. A scene like this is gonna heavily depend on which workflows you use, so keep that in mind. Yeah, looking cool. The cool little scene. I'm gonna let you do your thing, right? And then if you have like more specific questions in the future, feel free to shout them out. I shouldn't worry too much for the baked normal textile density. Not for the cliffs, no. Yeah, not really. It's also like a weird, it's also like a unique case, right? Especially with big cliffs or rocks and all that kind of stuff. You want to get as close as possible, but sometimes it might not work out that way. Yeah, thanks for sharing your work, Plamen. I left a personal project that were too demanding. My motivation was not there anymore. So I started some small dioramas, then a bigger one, and now I want to create a whole environment. Yeah, and that's a good way of building it up. I'm pretty sure that I showed this before, but I have like, I don't know, 200 gigs of like dead projects that I've just never finished, right? Not only like art stuff, but also like a bunch of other stuff too. Never used this, but I can think about a project where I could learn how to use it. Honestly, if you want to learn how to use like RGB masking, just do like a rock or something like that. And make it look good without using like a unique texture. Just a single rock, you know? Adam sent me a great video for this exact purpose like a few weeks back. Yeah, that's the one from Dylan Abernathy, right? I think that was the name that I was thinking about before. I could only think about like his YouTube handle, which is like TD, right? Or tie-dye. Boo, another ad. A single rock? Yeah, so if you really want to learn a skill, right? Try to pick the thing that is like the easiest thing that you can do just to get to grips with the workflow. And if you really like that workflow, then build a project around it. But just cut yourself some slack and just focus on the minimum viable product, right? Because it doesn't matter if you say, yeah, for example, if you want to build like a big haunted castle on like a massive rock cliff, the goal of the project was, hey, I kind of want to learn about RGB masking. But now it means that you have to sit down and do a project for 6 months for no reason, right? Because you learn the workflow in the first couple of weeks, and then the rest of the time you're just doing stuff. Yeah. I did a lot of smaller projects where I was just like, okay, single focus. I'm just going to focus on this. I'm not going to care about anything else. And still, one of them is still in my portfolio, right? I keep bringing that up. Like the forest. It doesn't have a story. Like the lighting is okay. But like it was purely focused on like, hey, I want to know how to make foliage. And that's what I'm going to do. And that is even like a big example, right? Like the way that I kind of treated it is that my goal for that was I wanted to know how to make a tree. I want to know how to make like a bush type thing. And then I want to know how to make like grass type stuff. Okay, Adam. Adam is up next. Let's see. This was a portfolio question, right? Let's see. In addition to some feedback on the renders, the lighting angles, and any missing angles or other fun ideas, I also appreciate some thoughts if I should clean out my older material work. I feel that I've improved quite a lot, but would appreciate a second opinion if it's good enough to place a new material front and center. So in your case, like it doesn't really matter that much if you start cutting out older work necessarily, right? Because in your case, you already have like industry experience. So it purely becomes up to you, right? Because now it becomes like you could leave it on there and show progression, or you could leave it out and just optimize your portfolio, right? So the choice on that matter is like totally in your hands. It's more about like what kind of portfolio and what kind of definition you want to project for yourself, right? Because for example, this could have multiple applications, right? If you want like students to come to your portfolio and see that, oh yeah, this person is making progression and you kind of want to be an inspiration for them, then you could do it that way. Or if you only care about studio work, right? Then you probably want to optimize it. But this is yours. You could also have like a separate map where you have like older work and have both of them at the same time. It depends on you. Let's see. Lighting on the renders. This might be something to think about, like the consistency between renders, right? That could be like nice to have like as a general portfolio thing where the stuff that you're doing with this one, like this one over here, kind of is in line with the stuff that you're doing over here, right? So consistency could be very interesting here. As for what you're doing with the actual presentation, you can definitely make that more interesting, right? Make it more interesting in terms of what is the context that this is going to be used in, right? Again, it doesn't have to be too much, but if you, I don't know, I know that this is not like an alley wall, right? But just having like a couple of props at the bottom of it and having like a floor underneath it, not distracting from the wall itself, right? But having that is way more interesting than just looking at like a tileable, right? Because it is okay. It's not bad, but I feel like you can push things further along. Right? Experiment with some things, like try some different applications, right? It could also be cool to, I don't know, because I think this is your wall that you have in your current project where it's the seawall, right? That's what I was looking for. Maybe do something around that, right? Something to make it like more exciting than it currently is. Yeah, and yeah, you're going with like a very contrasting like light setup, right? With like the harsh shadows and all that kind of stuff. That's honestly like a personal thing. When it comes to that, I would honestly like go back to the consistency question, right? Like how do you want to present your work? Like is it going to be like a little bit more dark and harsher, or do you want to, I don't know, have it more light, right? That's more up to you. But yeah, something there could help. That's what I would look at in your case, is just what would make sense for your portfolio and the consistency of that portfolio, right? Or yeah, better yet, like how do you want to be perceived, right? Like how do you stand out? I know that's like a very high level question, but that's the way that I look at portfolios, right? If you take extra care of like the presentation and like all the logos and all the fonts and all that kind of stuff, I know that you take care of like all the details and you're an artist by heart, right? And maybe a little bit of a graphic designer as well. So yeah. Yeah. I hope that helped. I think that was it, right? Let's see. Yeah. Yeah. It comes down to you. Like the way that you want to be perceived and the way that you want to present yourself, right? That's the thing that I would focus on now. But thank you for sharing your work. It's coming together nicely though. Coming together nicely. Gonna be good to see on like the sea wall. Gonna be nice. Okay. Next one up. Let's see, we have Bodhi here. I think let's jump around a little bit. Fair point. Maybe have the render mesh be a bit swirly, showcasing more highlights, reflections, etc. Because the roughness detail is there. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Anything, right? And like maybe, like I said, maybe making it like a seawall, right? that could also incorporate like the study you're saying now, like making it like a little bit more swirly, lighting it up in like a slightly different way, and just showcasing, yeah, showcasing like the actual use case a little bit more. And the roughness, of course. Bodhi, let's have a look. Bodhi's back with a vengeance, making a haunted forest. Looking really nice. I have actually not seen this before, which is looking really cool. Hope you don't mind me sharing this, but this is the way that it's currently looking. It's looking really nice. The question actually was, I have this hero tree and initially wanted to retopo it, but the roots are a nightmare. So I did it with some poly paint in ZBrush and decimated it after I had some good seams. Do you think it's bad not to retopologize it? This is an interesting one. Because the general rule when it comes to retopologizing is if it's going to be animated, God, my writing is terrible today. If we're going to have animation on it, then our topology needs to be clean. Right? Because that gives the reason why that is mentioned is because then like an animator can come in and make use of the topology there, right? And reliably like animate this person as well, or like the face in this case. Where if you just have like a bunch of triangles, the triangulation is gonna fuck up with like the animation, right? So that's why you usually see like very specific like layouts, very specific layouts when it comes to meshes that are gonna animate, right? So faces, arms, legs, like all that kind of stuff is gonna have specific topology because it's built towards how you're gonna be animating and rigging things up. So if this was gonna have animation, it needs to be clean. However, I think in this case, if it's static, then decimation can work. Like you're already doing. With certain cases of animation, for example, with trees, right? Like trees in general, you can get away with triangulation because the actual animation on them is never going to be that intense to where the actual poly count of a tree cannot handle the animation, right? So I think this is fine. Probably not then. Yeah, I don't think so. Decimated meshes are hell to create seams. Yeah, they require like a bit more cleanup. Like taking the shortest path, right? Like that tool can help you a lot. And tools like Prism UV can help a lot with more intense meshes too. Let's see. Also, since the tree stump is so big, I used two 4K meshes, but it's still half the textile density I wanted to use for the scene. I added a tileable normal on top, just like you do with big rocks, but just want to hear your opinion if that's a bad practice. Next time I should plan ahead better. So yeah, I would honestly, if you want to get like really high detail, that's probably the way that you want to do it, the way that you did it. I would potentially, let's see. Think about this, because there is an area where you want more details, right? Especially this area here. That needs to be a detailed area. The rest of it is honestly more like your stereotypical tree, right? So you can get away with this stuff looking like a bit more basic. Potentially that could be something to look into, where you have like a seam around the edges of this. Or like maybe try to hide the seam like in the interior of it. And then give that like a separate UV, right? So that you can add all the details in like the face, because that's honestly where most people are going to be looking, right? So that's where most people are going to be focusing on, because it's a human face. People get attracted to human faces, especially because they look at them. We're so used to looking at them. That might be an interesting way of working. And then for the rest of it, you want to honestly build as much as you can just with like a tideable texture. Right? Where maybe you could do it the way that you did it, where you have like your basic your basic normal bake, right? Because you still want to have like detail up here. Realizing that now. Yeah. Let me rethink that, right? So the face I would do separately. And then the rest of the tree I would do like you said, like following like the rock workflow. Because the technical way that this would work, right, is that the areas where you want to have details, for example, and then the entire root structure, right? If you follow the pipeline for most trees, as far as I'm aware, you would have this stuff be more unique. And then the rest of it would be tideable. That's the way that a normal tree would work, right? So you would have this unique mesh that blends into a tideable mesh that then potentially, in your case, goes into a unique mesh again, because you want to have that detail on like the stumps that are cut off, right? But in your case, I honestly don't think you need to go that far and that technical. You can just keep it to what you already have and kind of just use like the rock workflow, right? But this is just a way that it probably would work in like most situations. Mesh Lab, I've never used Mesh Lab either. That's cool though. Yeah. But yeah. So there's nothing really wrong. Like I would just like separate the face, right? Like the area that you want to have like a lot of detail in, I would just separate that out and just have that as like a separate mesh. So instead of having like two ones where you're like, I don't know, symmetry the whole tree, you could then potentially turn that into like, hey, we have one high detail mesh for like the face, and then we have like the more generic stuff for like the rest of the tree. So yeah, I hope that was helpful. You can use like 2x 4K textures. If we zoom out again and we think about where the camera is going to be, it might not be an issue, right? So you don't necessarily have to like update this, but this would be the way that it will work. Cool. Thanks, Bodhi. Thanks for showing off, showing your updates. That was awesome. We're gonna put some speed into this now. Salam or Salem or I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but I think this is the first time that I'm seeing your work, so welcome, welcome. It's awesome to have you here. Is there anything that pops out to you that could be improved? We're gonna keep it like very quick and very generic, right? Since you're new here, feel free to ask questions for the next update that you might have. Like a couple of quick ones is I want to see more focus on what matters. And this is through contrast, right? Especially when it comes to the light. Especially here, right? Because you got to be aware that like a lot of the focus, because it is so bright, goes here. And it almost feels like a missed opportunity because we're not getting that much light over here necessarily. And that means that we're focusing mostly over here when like the cool stuff should be down here, right? So that would be something to fix as well. With this shot, have a think about, again, somewhat the same question. Where are we looking? Right? Like, or where do you want us to look? Because right now, I'm not really sure what the purpose is here. And it might be, if we're doing just like a nice like corridor shot, it could still be nice to have like a focal point in the scene itself, right? And maybe even brightening up the whole scene through giving the global illumination a lot more bounce to it, right? Because I feel that's the whole scene feels somewhat like a little bit too contrasty for what's something that's supposed to be like, I don't know, very upbeat, like very fantasy like, right? So it's kind of weird, right? Because I said, hey, add a bit more contrast where it matters, but I'm literally talking about like making the focal point. Let me clear that up, right? So we want to lighten the focal point. Lighten the focal point, and then also oh god, this is turning into the same thing again. Yeah, so lighten the focal point and make sure that we have a focal point, right? And the second part was reduce the contrast. And that's more of a question mark, right? That's up to you. Because I feel like it doesn't have that like fantasy touch to it, right? Where you have like a little bit more of like the brightened colors and you just have like, oh, this is nice. But that's more up to you. Let's have a quick glance at some of the other stuff. Yeah, I think honestly the major thing for me is I want to focus. I know that you want us to focus on this desk, but right now it really doesn't feel like that. So the framing is a little bit confusing at this point. The rest of the scene looks really nice though. I like that you have like an open space, which is like an area of rest, and then it's like surrounded by like all this clutter. It's quite nice. Always have a focal point, but why should we think of our final result as an image if it's an environment for video games? The same thing still applies there though. Like in video games, you also have focal points. And they become even more important in non-linear games, right? We just do it in like a bunch of different ways. I know that I try to keep it like relatively simple and I talk about lighting a lot, but there's so many ways that you can make something stand out. Because that is part of our job, right? Like through art, we have to guide a person from like point A to point B. Obviously, we do that on the backs of level design, right? Where they have to sort of control the environment to a certain degree, but then we build art on top of that and make sure that we can guide them through the environment. But yeah, thank you so much for your post, Selim. Lovely to see your updates. And yeah, but next time, feel free to ask questions as well. Go to coffee next. Coffee, where are you? There you are. Not very happy with the handle yet. Something is off, but I can't figure out what. Appreciate any thoughts on that. Some smaller parts aren't done yet, but I won't have time in the next 2 weeks. That's okay. Every frame a painting, does it apply to video games? To a certain degree. I feel like every frame a painting is very implicit that you need to make every frame beautiful. But in video games, you don't necessarily have a lot of control over the player, right? Especially when it comes to like open worlds. Because I'll give you like a quick overview, right? So let's say we have an environment and our character is standing here and we want them to focus on something here, right? So this is our focal point. Then we can kind of put stuff in place to kind of block their vision a little bit. And maybe there's like a path that kind of runs down to it. And we put some stuff in place that like, oh, they can see this stuff like really clearly, right? Coming from the path. But what if I'm a person? Let's make this person green. What if I'm a person and I'm standing here? Or even, maybe a better example, here. Right? We don't necessarily have that control over it, like, majority of the time. And there's also a degree where you can kind of... we can kind of exaggerate a lot of things in the world. So, for example, if we then take this sort of map and we say, like, okay, let's take it to 3D. Right? So... I'm standing here, I'm looking out, and then we have like a tree here, there's a tree over here, and then if I want to make something stand out, cool, I'll just put it on a mountain, right? And then I'll make the thing really big. So there's like a giant tower, and then you have like all just like trees like nicely fixated around it, and then you have the path coming down, right? We can do that, but that's also gonna be limited to like where the player guides you or is guided, right? So that's why we usually focus a lot of our attention on the main pathways and the main corridors that players are going to go through, and then the rest of it kind of just we try to make it nice if it works, but we usually don't have like a lot of freedom. So we focus our attention on like the most important things first, and then the rest of it kind of has to fall into place. Players that run through the forest instead of using the path. Exactly. Yeah. It's a little bit easier, like it's a lot easier with like a very linear game, right? Because with a linear game, there's going to be certain moments where you know that the player is going to go through a funnel, and then you can like specifically direct people to look at a certain thing or do something like that, right? Yeah. Some good questions though. Those are some really interesting topics to talk about. But yeah, we don't we don't really have the choice to do that like in all the frames because that would be crazy. Plus, also, like, sometimes it's really nice to just build, like, a nice looking environment, and then sometimes the building pieces for, like, nice framing just fall into place. You have those, like, Bob Bob Ross, like, happy accidents, you know? Okay, coffee, what are we talking about here? So, um, not very happy with the handle yet. So, are we talking about, like, this thing here? Or are we talking about the actual section where you hold stuff? My environment was the Hobbit one. You spoke about it not feeling fantasy. Could you elaborate more about what you mean by that? Yeah, sure. It comes down to the colors and how saturated the colors are. Look at the Shire in the Hobbit, right? Look at the colors and like how intense and saturated the colors are. Um, that's or maybe I mean tooting our own horn to like a certain degree, even though I had nothing to do with it then. But look at Fable, right? Let's have a look here. Okay, let's have a look at the handle. So I think with the handle, like with the grip or the handle or whatever, the thing that's really throwing it off is firstly, you have these edges that have the material that should not be on them yet, right? Which makes them feel like they're floating. Because what I would expect is that you have like the same blue material on them, but it kind of has like a shadow underneath it to like, or like AO or shadow or something like that to kind of indicate that there's like a split between materials. Right? But right now, especially on these guys over here, it feels like it doesn't make sense yet. I think it's one mesh, which it doesn't need to be. Right now it seems like you just have like the sections that are coming out and they're like connected to like the main thing as like one mesh. I would potentially just not do that if it allows you to get rid of some of the issues here. Will strong AO help? You don't want to go too strong either, right? But definitely having AO in there definitely helps. And the fabric That definitely, these ones are connected, right? Where like the fabric feels like it's floating. Salam, when you talk about the saturation of the colors, do you mean to increase the saturation value on them? The best thing that I can honestly say is look at references for that. Because I don't want to just say like, oh yeah, increase the saturation. Just have a look at how the colors of, let's say, the Shire compare to what you have now, right? I made it as 1 because of the poly count. You're honestly not saving a lot. Because what you could do with the poly count, right, is you could separate those two out and then make the actual blade itself, you could really simplify a lot of that. So I would honestly say that you're not really saving polys, you're adding a ton of polys. Because now every part, every section in between has like a couple of connections here. Right? Where if you separate the two, you only need the complexity in the blue fabric, but like the structure underneath it can just be like a really long curved cylinder, right? So yeah, I don't think the polycount argument is necessarily one that makes sense here. You still want to have like the polycount where it matters, right? Like the fabric stuff, you can still keep like the amount of polys that you have on there because you kind of want to have. I'm not sure how to do the bake then. Just do them as like separate things, right? Bake by mesh name could help you a lot with that as well. You can look up if you want to go into my post. I'm not sure. You're still doing the same texture on it though. I'm not talking about like changing the actual texture, right? The texturing on it can remain the same. I'm just talking about like from like because you said that you did it because of topology reasons. That specifically doesn't make sense. Or like for poly count reasons, right? That doesn't necessarily make sense. Yeah, the main thing is that stretching definitely needs to go. I think honestly, without the stretching, you could make it work. And you just need to make sure that you have like a bit of AO to separate the two things. The way that you could do that, yeah, we're just gonna keep moving on. So the way that you could do that is if you have the high poly, right? So you have your fabric, which currently this is probably, so this is the grip, right? The base of the grip. Like I'm talking about like this stuff here. That's the grip. The way that you probably have it now with the cloth is that the cloth makes like a connection like this, right? The way that you probably want to have it set up though is you want to have it come in and then like curl underneath it. Right? Because then as soon as you're going to bake it, you're going to introduce like some AO over here. And that's going to separate the two. Right? Because it kind of looks like this is just, it like transitions into into the other surface like a bit too cleanly. So having that little lip is going to give you like a little bit more shadow information. And that's the way that you could also do it. But yeah, that could definitely work. And then once you like clean up like some of the stretching that you have here and you do this kind of trick, I think we're in a good spot then though. But yeah, playing around with the AO and like the intensity of your AO map could definitely be like a thing to try out. It's indeed just like 90-degree angle to barely AO. Yeah, exactly. You never want to have like a straight transition like this or like one that is really flat because that's not going to give you like any information, right? You can keep the cloth strips extruded. Yeah, if you wanted to. I just want to make sure that like from a topology or polycount perspective, you're not saving a whole ton, right? Because you're adding a lot of complexity when it comes to the base of the grip in this case. But that's all fine. So adding a little lip is definitely going to help with that as well. Fortunately, no better resolution. I picked the best Katana. I picked the Katana project too fast. That's all right. And I think honestly, like the other things that I wanted to point out was just the texturing on it. But I assume that you're still working on that as well. Yeah. All right. I have to take a little pee break. I'll be right back. Right, we're back. Got to unmute there. Oh, you want to go again? Okay. Look at him just waiting for the door to open. Right. Little baby. Okay. Thank you for showing your work, Coffee. Gonna be moving on. Next one up, Lena. Lena is building a retro witch interior. Love to get your thoughts on the last two screenshots. Oh, I just grabbed them all. So these two. All right, we can remove all these guys then. Go! Let's see. I have almost finished texturing all my assets, but I'm kind of stuck with the IVs around the arch. I am not sure if they fit with the rest of the environment. They seem to have too little detail or maybe too much. Oh. Oh, are maybe too much. Okay. I don't really mind them necessarily. I just have one question where it's like, why are they here? Right? Like, why is there ivy growing in like the middle of this space? Again, it could be like a magical kind of thing, but it feels like the scene doesn't necessarily need it. So that might be something to think about. Even though I'm like always a big fan of having like something that's man-made with like the contrast of like the natural elements, right? So I'm just gonna ask a question to you. Is it needed? Do you require the ivy? Because otherwise I don't necessarily mind it. You could kind of make it logical if you wanted to, right? Kind of just have like, I don't know, like a big plant pot here. And you kind of have like the ivy just growing out of it. The thing that is missing though is the root system, right? Especially in the sections that are like more opened up. I kind of expect to see like lots of roots. Because for the most part, it's actually like nicely covered up and we can't really see too much of it. But there's a couple of areas where it starts to really break down. So we're missing the roots. It could also be like a really interesting way of adding a little bit more randomization into the mix, right? Where, for example, you could have like some ivy coming down here, right? And you could fill up this space, but then leave this space like a little bit more open. Right, so it could be like a really nice way of adding like a little bit of asymmetry into the whole thing. So it could add asymmetry into the mix, which is nice, you know? Always makes it more interesting to look at. But that could definitely be a thing that you could play around with. And you could kind of have it like go to the back of it or something like that, right? Where we can't really see it behind the curve here. Then it makes our way up to the front again. So that could be interesting. Let's see. I played around with different sizes and colors, but they still look odd within the environment. I'm a little unsure about my colors in the environment. Okay, so they still look a little bit odd in the environment. I mean, it is like a big contrasting color, right? Because all the other colors, you don't really have like any other colors inside of that spectrum. So that's probably where that is coming from. You could like remedy this in like a couple of ways by adding like a couple more plants like around certain areas, right? So let's say you have like a little plant corner down here. You have like lots of little potted plants. Maybe like a chunky boy in the back. You know, something like that. You could like up the amount of green that you have in your environment and then have like the ivy growing to kind of help that as well. But it is almost like you're adding like a deliberate like green arch in your environment that is like really contrasting with like the rest of the scene right now, right? So it can both be a very interesting it can be like a very interesting way of adding focus to your scene, right? Because this arch can also be used as like a framing device as well. So I don't think it's necessarily bad. But yeah, I would play around with the colors a little bit more and see what you can do with that. And then sometimes you just have to trust your gut where you're like, hey, I've tried like a bunch of techniques. I still don't know about this ivy. Try to reduce it. Maybe only have it at the top or something like that. See if it still is annoying then, and then just get rid of it, right? Because sometimes we try stuff out and it doesn't really work. I know that you spend like a bit of time on that, but maybe it's better without it, right? Yeah. Let's see. The other question was, I'm a little unsure about my colors in my environment. I think the focus is now in the middle where the character should stand. Yeah. Well, let me give you like a quick thing, right? So there's a couple of ways of doing this. A couple of ways of figuring out where the focus is going to, right? Make it really small. Or you can turn it to black and white. Or you could even like blur it as well. Couple of ways of doing this. They oftentimes call this a squint test, where you squint your eyes and that kind of makes like everything blurry, and then that helps you like focus on the things that you want to focus on. Right, so if we just like have like a little blur on here, you can kind of see that you are right? Like for the most part, like you're focusing on like the middle section where you want people to focus on. But you can also see that there is like a little part to the left that is still like attracting like a lot of attention at the same time, right? Because you do have like this nice little section in the middle. But then there's also this guy over here still. It is still attracting like a bit of attention as well. So that would be something to think about. But it seems hard to make the colors fit with the character. Any ideas on how to fix that? Okay, so you wanna fit the colors of the character with the rest of the scene then. Well, this is a question. Do you want to make them fit? Or do you want to make the characters stand out? Right, that's like one thing to think about. We talked about the squint test. Because what you're going for right now feels like you're trying to blend the two together, right? You're trying to create like a consistency between the colors, which is going to make it like hard to distinguish the character from the background, right? So yeah, because in terms of like values, maybe apart from like the white clothing, right? Like the rest of the character seems to fit quite nicely. It's just I'm not sure if that's the purpose or not, because right now, if you look at it from a distance, the character starts to blend in like quite quickly. Also because this part specifically has a lot of stuff going on already, and then we're adding a character into the mix as well, right? So again, it's one of those things where if you want to make the character stand out, it might make sense to simplify the stuff behind it, to make the character stand out more, right? Stranger is saying the scene would benefit from the rule of thirds. No, yeah, potentially. Like, honestly, it depends on what's gonna happen with the character, right? But the framing at the bottom is a little bit close, because they are gonna go. You can have like a centralized composition, right? I think this piece, actually, I don't mind that it has like such a central focus on the whole composition, but you can still use the same composition guidelines to then decide like, okay, I'm gonna put like something here or here, right? Because we don't want to see stuff like in the middle or like too far at the bottom, right? And now the character feels, because we want to showcase the arch and the character in the same frame, then it might make more sense to like pull the camera back and have it stand out more. But that's, I know, like, I was unsure what you meant with what the goal was for the character, Lena. So try to identify what the goal is there first, if you want to make the character blend in, or if you want to make it fit in more. Because the only thing that I can really point at is that maybe the white of the colors doesn't really make too much sense if you want to go with the same color scheme. But yeah, it depends on you. Plans for magic potions? Hell yeah. Yep, thank you for showing that off, Lena. Let's go to Luke. Luke Waldrop. Let's see. Any input you have is valuable. Waterfall material and grass is not mine. I did make the voltage scalp and straw cards for the roof. The character pulling a book on the shelf to the right would create the rule of thirds composition with the character while the scene stayed centered. Oh my god. My reading ability just dropped the ball on that. Well, but then you need to make sure that you balance the two correctly, right? Because then we already have like a really strongly identified like first focal point. So to me, it honestly would make sense to integrate the character in there more, but then thinking about a way that you can make them stand out, right? So that's where maybe if you then reduce the amount of ivy, you make the character's clothes like greenish or something like that, then you're trying to make the character stand out, and then maybe they could be like reading a book or something like that, right? That could be a way. I mean, there's so many ways, right? But it's hard to give good support for a goal that I don't understand, because I don't know if the purpose was to make the character stand out or blend in. That's why I was so hesitant to say something there. But yeah, look, let's have a look. Any input you have is valuable. I have done all my staging and placement for this camera. The story I settled on after the feedback is a supply depot. I want this shot to read resupply. I've loaded the scene up with quickly made crates, fishing gear, etc. And some lighthouse beacons and ships. Hold on, I think I screwed them up. Yeah. Wait, let's see. Okay, so that's like camera 1, right? Okay. All to lead to the docks? Does it read? There's a lot going on here. Let me get through like the cameras first and like some of the feedback. I wanted to take a look at what other kind of shots I want to add, but love your feedback on what you think work well. I would want to know what shots I might be using first in order to focus my efforts refine my models. And the level of detail seen. I'm assuming that that's like this one over here. Okay. We are gonna cut down on some stuff here. We're gonna focus up a little bit. Okay. Yeah, let's start with this guy over here. Grab a sip of water first. So, we've got supply station, right? That was the thing that you wanted to go for. That's okay. We can focus up ourselves. Don't worry about it. So, supply station. Does this read as a supply station to you at this point? Right? Let's start there, because I think what you tried to do was good, right? You've added barrels, and then you added like fishery stuff, fishing gear, crates, barrels, all that kind of stuff. But it's still confusing, right? So a supply station to me is like super generic. I think we need to focus up on like a specific thing. Like, for example, the supply is like, what do you mean? Like, what are they supplying, right? That's going to be crucial to the visuals that we're going to make, right? Because now we have generic stuff and fishing stuff, right? So we have crates, barrels, and fishing gear. So we don't really read that generic stuff as like anything more than it is, right? It's super generic. So that means that if you look at this starts to read more as like a fishing village, right? Because the main component that we can see is that there's like a half-eaten shark, like I don't know, like a swordfish on the floor, and like a bunch of fish that are like being dried, right? So like Stranger is saying, we're getting fishing village vibes. Because that is a specific thing that we can read immediately and then be like, oh, okay, this guy is or this person is like a fisher. Cool. Then let's say we decide to go with that, right? Let's assume that is like our specific thing that we want to go for. Now we need to take that to the next level, because it's pretty much still subdued, right? And there's a couple of questions that come up then. So we have what? Let's say fishing. Cool. What does a fishing boat look like? What makes them different? How do they fish? Right? Like, how do they store them? Like, all that kind of stuff comes into play. And then we can start looking into like, okay, so we have some equipment here. Let's overemphasize those things, right? So cool. We have a bunch of nets. We then also have like a, I don't know, hastily thrown up barrier, because that kind of makes sense, right? So we're kind of adding to like the shitty vibe a little bit with that. That's more just like generic set dressing. We're giving it like a personal touch. And then this stuff is cool, where you have like fishes hanging from here. Again, like really overemphasizing some of the elements that make it fishing, right? So let's see, here to there to here. We're just hanging like a bunch of fish. And then maybe, where would it make sense? Let's hang a bunch of fish here. Let's maybe have like another dry rack here as well, like in the back. Right, and then maybe you have like these like lobster pots or something like that, right? Where have like a bunch of fishing equipment. Maybe there's like a couple of fishing ropes like still in the water. Right, and then those barrels. Let's see. Those barrels could be full of like dried fish. What are you going to need for dried fish? Salt, right? Like, I think the way that they prepared them, I've not looked into this specifically, but you have like a layer of fish, a layer of salt, a layer of fish, a layer of salt. They would also smoke them pretty regularly as well, right? So maybe we have like a smoker somewhere. Maybe the back of this could be, what would that look like? Right, so you have like a smoker hut, which is just like, ooh, there's like a cool little plume coming out here. Right? And let's see, what else do we need? Got the smoke hut, we got, let's add like a couple more nets. This boat is cool. We probably want to make it like slightly bigger as well. Right, but what I'm trying to do is I'm really trying to overemphasize like, okay, this is the fishing hut. Bam. That's it. I'm not trying to make it any more complex. I'm just making it a freaking fishing hut, right? Cool. So that's point one for the story. There's the location logic, which is what I refer to often. What I mean with location logic is, cool, if this is a fishing village, or like a fishing house, right? We're just making it a single house. Cool, if this is like a fishing house, how do they... I'm going to keep it like really generic terms, right? How do they process the fish? And how do they export the fish? Super generic, right? But like processing could look like the stuff that we talked about before. Smoke. Salting the fish. And putting them into barrels. And then transporting the fish out with boats. Or maybe even carts, right? So now I'm thinking about, okay, a cart. Because we're bringing the fish in. This is like I'm imagining what I'm doing in my head, right? Like I'm imagining like a freaking island. This guy is here fishing, right? And then there's like this like really curvy like path that goes here to like the bigger settlement, for example. Right? And then every day he takes like his cart, brings all the fish, goes to the market over here, sells the fish, and then goes all the way back. That's what I'm imagining, right? It'd be like a cool little backstory, but then we can kind of hint at that backstory too, by then having like a cart over here that potentially has like some of those barrels that we talked about earlier, right? Just indicating that this is a person that's bringing in like all the fish, processing them, and then like shipping them away again. Cool. So story and location logic. We have that done. And same can be added here, right? same thing. You can like really play up like the amount of fish and like the amount of stuff as he's just catching. Right? And then, oh, there's gonna be like really big like salt piles like next to the barrels because he's salting all the fish, and this one is open and has like these fish on top of them. Maybe he's like, I don't know, like smoking the fish out here, you know? But really, really playing it up that if you look at this image, I can instantly tell, wow, this is like a fishing hut. Awesome. Also, now we're gonna dive into a little bit more of, I'm gonna keep it very, very, very big. But we want to make sure that it's a little bit easier to distinguish where people can walk in an effort to reduce the amount of noise and similarity that we have in this environment. This doesn't always come down to only textures. It can come down to the light that you use. It can come down to like a bunch of stuff, right? What that means is that you could like really emphasize like the center of the planks and make them way lighter than the exterior of the planks, right? You're already doing some of that, which is awesome. You can just do that a little bit more to really emphasize like, hey, this is where people are walking in, and the rest of it, eh. Also having a little bit of a breakup, because think about texture breakup. Sorry, let me clarify. Having a little bit of a texture breakup can help a lot, especially with creating a little bit more variation, because now everything is brown, right? But what I kind of want to see, especially in such like a wet environment, is like water, right? Like let's say like these planks are just like really wet because they brought in like a bunch of fish, and we have like a really nice roughness variation, right? And we can kind of add that to like a certain sections to then again thinking about like how we want to break up and like lead people into the frame. We can use that roughness variation on certain cases where it makes sense, right? Now let's zoom out to the bigger picture then. Creating a smooth curved shape in the background to break up some of the more blocky foreground shapes. Yeah. Again, not going to go into detail, but I want to see reference for the landscape. And how those how like a fishing village or like a fishing hut would be integrated within that, right? Because what I can tell, the majority of it like would make sense that you have like a nice and steady slope going into the water, right? So that it doesn't go like deep immediately, but you have like more of a transition going into the water, so that you have like a little bit of a beach as well. And then the pier goes into water a little bit more. Right, but then we have like a nice shoreline that we can kind of play with. Right, and then there's this buildup from the shore to like the mountains in the back that feels like it's a combination of like a bunch of stuff where you have like really blocky cliffs, but then you also have like really soft landscape like immediately in the background. Have a look at references and make sure that that is like in a really good position. Because like Adam was saying, like you can kind of use that to direct into the scene, right? Where if you have like more of a slopey, curvy, like beach kind of area, and then maybe there's like a little bit of like a roughness breakup in certain areas, you can kind of use that to like maybe even like make the silhouette of the building stand out. So let's see, what can we do with that? right? If it kind of goes into like the building here, and then we try to make the silhouette of the building stand out more. Right? Because this is the most important thing, right? We want this shape to stand out from the rest. And right now, this shape is kind of just like a mass in the back that is kind of taking over what we want to see in the foreground. But I would definitely look at a reference landscape and see how that would look in real life and focus on that. Agree that it's nice that it's showing, but it has to be more muddy, especially because it's an active place with boats coming and going. Yeah, exactly. Like you're gonna have a lot of interaction between the water and the elements and like the stuff that you're trying to showcase, right? Where now, if we're talking about like the approach to the texturing, it feels like this is like a dry shack that is placed in like a wet environment. Doesn't really make sense. Again, really complicated environment though. I know that we talked about a lot of stuff here, but it's a really complex environment. And if you really want to make it look good, you're going to need to take a lot of time because all these little things that we pointed out today are going to be crucial to sell that image. So yeah. So yeah, definitely have a look at landscape references. And then use those landscape references as a way to point to the building. Or point to the house. Right, and I also want to see a little bit more of a beach / transition. Not necessarily... I'm working from pictures that I took in California. That makes sense. Because, I mean, that makes sense in a way that this looks a bit disconnected because this is not what that environment would look like, right? You would be looking at like beaches in like Norway or Scandinavian countries, right? If you're trying to do something like that's Viking inspired, it needs to be in a place where Vikings actually were, right? So yeah, there's a disconnect that happens when we try to embed something in something else that doesn't make sense, right? Especially with something that is like as well known in pop culture as Vikings, right? But yeah. Cool stuff, Luke. Like I said again, difficult environment. You kind of want to make sure that you, because especially the transition from like water into beach into then like landscape, to do that convincingly is very tricky. So I would honestly try to figure out ways on how to obscure that transition as much as possible. Like, for example, with making the water like less transparent, right? That gives you like a lot more leeway with stuff underneath the water surface. And then also the transition of the beach, I would honestly cover most of that up with like scaffolding and stuff built on top of it, because that's going to be annoying. So yeah, best of luck, Luke. Best of luck. Let's see, Connor. Would like some feedback on dessert material. Any tips on stuff designer to get better depth? To get better depth? Okay. I'm gonna have to move a little bit quicker here because we're massively over time today. I'm still not good at time management. Take breaks. Yep, you definitely should take breaks. Better depth. It's normal, your normal map, and AO. But I would take it in that order. What I tend to do a lot, been a while actually. I need to think how I did it. I would try to break out like separate layers and then have like more control over like the separate layers and their AO, right? So for example, the sticks, I would have like a separate AO map for the sticks that I then blend on top of like all my other AO maps. To give me like a bit more control. Same thing for the normals. Like the way that I break it down is I try to separate them out as much as I can, and then I try to like emphasize the bigger sticks compared to the other sticks by like just controlling the normal a little bit. But that's gonna take like a bunch of back and forth, honestly. Number 2 is some general feedback is that the main thing that I can see that the base color of the actual dirt is too varied at the moment. Because especially if you're gonna then have this on like a landscape, these patches that are like darker are gonna stand out like a sore thumb. So one thing that actually helps is test, test, and test. You have to test this in like an environment where you can see it actually being used. Otherwise, you're working in a vacuum and you don't really have like any specific control over things, right? So test a lot. And then, is it actually possible to set the scale in Substance Designer? For example, if it has to be 6 meters in scale, how would I go about doing that? Yeah, someone else said that you can manually adjust the scale and the output size under base properties. But what is actually more important to know is if, let's say, you want this section to occupy 6 meters, right? So let's go with the 6 meter example. Then what we need to figure out is your textile density first. Right? Your textile density of your environment. And then say like my textile density is, as an example, let's give like a tactical example here. 512 pixels per meter, right? So every meter that we occupy, we're gonna have like a 512 pixel. So that means if we then just multiply this times 6, then we roughly end up with like plus minus a 3K map, right? It's like some quick math. 6 meters probably doesn't make too much sense because that's just like a random number thrown out there, right? For like a 6 meter, you would then need like a 3K map to kind of work with that textile density of 512 in mind. So that's the way that how you would calculate it. We actually have like a deep dive document on our website that talks about like textile density and all that kind of stuff. There's like a section on titleables in there too that you can check out. Yeah, hope that helps, Connor. Best of luck. Yeah, keep iterating, man. Keep going. Next up, Joe Johnson. A 3K map doesn't make sense, but like you have to think about it as in like math, right? So that's why I said that like 6 meter, that value also doesn't make too much sense because in most cases, what you would actually have in your environment is multipliers of 2, right? So in that case, you could either decide like, hey, I'm going to go under textile density, right? And then you pick like a 2K map, or I'm going above textile density because this is important for whatever reason, and I'm going to pick a 4K map. That's up to you. Hey, Joe. Let's see. Oh, this one. Made some changes to the lighting and blood decals on the floor, trying to balance it a little bit more. I'm playing with the idea of tweaking the set dressing a little bit more so that the creature has come out of the TV and brought a wave of like energy. Okay. Be cool. And then blown it out, right? So you kind of have like stuff strewn about. Okay, that could be interesting. And the second idea is go with the paranormal route and have found a footage style video of someone walking down the hallway and like doing some sort of ghost hunting. I'm leaning towards the second idea, so it doesn't drastically increase the workload. I would love some ideas though. No, those sound good. You could potentially combine the two as well. If you're honestly, oh Jesus Christ, I can chuck my pen all over the screen. If you want to go for option one, you have to overemphasize it, right? Or oversell the idea. Because you're getting something nice already. Like, I actually just want to see, like, I don't know, like a couple of loose panels hanging over here. Maybe like a couple more that are just like, I don't know, partially destroyed. And then kind of phase it out more and more. Right, so I'm kind of thinking about it. Okay, this is the center point. Right, and then we kind of have like a shockwave that kind of went to here. They kind of want to have like a first layer that's really damaged, second layer that's like more damaged, like you're already doing, right? It just needs to be like a little bit more emphasized than the occasional one here. So that we're really getting this feeling of like, oh yeah, this thing over here. What could be cool is that you have some sort of like blood coming out of it, right? What if you make a trail with that has like footsteps in it as well? Because then you're emphasizing like, oh shit, something came out of it and it like ran away bleeding. So something escaped from like a different dimension and like left behind like a trail of blood, or like it doesn't have to be blood, it can be like black sludge or something like that, right? And you can kind of see like footsteps. And you could do some like funny stuff with like, you could have like footsteps with like handprints as well, so you could kind of give an indication of like, oh, this is not a person that's just walking, this is like a person on all fours or something like that, right? But yeah, footprints. And all this stuff doesn't, you already have the geometry there anyway, right? So like doing a little bit more damage and then having like a blood trail or like blood or like black goo or whatever you want to do. Like that's pretty easy to make, right? That's not going to require like a whole bunch of time. So that could be interesting. It depends on what you want to do with it, right? But that could be an interesting way of approaching it. But I don't mind. Like the second idea could be cool as well. Second idea would be like more found footage, right? I think the found footage might be more intensive if you want to do it well in a way. Because then you have to do like some sort of like camera shake, right? This would be fun to play around with though, because there's like plugins where you can actually like link up your phone to your environment and then you could pretend that you are filming, but it's actually outputting that effect. Could be really interesting, but it will probably take more time. And then you would probably have to do some video editing as well. Like really think about like how you're going to sell the idea, because it would be cool to do something more with it rather than you just walking to it, right? Maybe you're walking the corridor and you're only seeing the red light, and then as you're like going into the corridor, like the TV jumps on and like the smoke comes out of it, right? But that also means that if you want to do the found footage style, you also have to potentially edit some like sound effects, all that kind of stuff into it too, right? Thanks, coffee. Have a nice evening. Yeah, this is gonna be, if you want to, in my opinion, like it would require video editing. to have it done well. So it's maybe not that heavy on 3D work, but it's something different, right? Because you can do so much cool stuff with it. Honestly, the thing that I was thinking at first, if you really want to sell the idea of like this shockwave coming out of the TV, right? It would be so freaking cool. Like, I'm imagining you walking down the corridor, TV jumps on, and it releases that shockwave, and it, like, flings open like the first 30 like lockers, right? Then you will see a subtle ghost effect in the back, and the camera will fall to the floor. And then the pentagram would like appear or something like that. You could, but that's a little bit cliche, right? I honestly think that you can like really simplify, well, depending on what you're gonna say, right? Like you can simplify the whole story down to the TV jumps on, there's like the mist just increases all of a sudden, right? Or you could do the shockwave effect, right? But I mean, there's so many options here that this is where you just have to like make a decision for what you wanted, right? Yeah. Yeah, keep it up, Joe. I like the scene. I like the way that this is coming together. I think the blood can use like a little bit. Is I want to see some interaction with the blood, right? If we're doing like blood decals, I kind of want to see them use like a little bit more logical, have some interaction or interplay with them. Be so cool. Because this section looks really nice, but it feels like this one, I don't know, it doesn't really read as blood anymore. Plus also it kind of has like a splatter effect, which is kind of what you wanted to go for with like the shockwave, I guess, but maybe not with the blood. Yeah. Hope that was helpful, Joe. Let's have a look at Moonlight next. What do you mean by interaction? So with interaction in this case, I mean footsteps in the blood or something like that, right? And that the blood kind of has a purpose of where it's coming from, right? Like the fog like makes total sense to me. The fog like coming out of the TV, that is so cool. But if you just have like blood on the floor there, I'm not sure like what caused it and how it came to be on the floor there, right? So you could potentially do something where where either yeah, that becomes too much. I was gonna say you could have blood coming out of the TV, right? And it starts pooling underneath the TV. That becomes too much if you're then also doing the fog on top of that. So yeah. Cool. Every 90-degree angle or sharp angle are seams, but not every seams are 90-degree angle. Yep. That's a rule of thumb that I give to everyone. It's also in like the tips collection as well. Very simple. Very, very to the point, especially when it comes to baking. So yeah, that makes total sense. When should we separate the textures on different maps, even for one prop? Should I distinguish metallic textures? I know that transparency may be a good reason to separate textures. No, like transparency is a good case because transparency would actually use a different shader inside of the engine, right? I know that it's kind of tricky to like preempt that, but yeah, transparency is a good reason to have it separate. Well, yeah, even that depends because you can add like transparency into it as well. So for this kind of prop, you don't have to think about that. You don't have to separate things out. This is just gonna be like nice on one UV and that's it. But yeah, The only ramification could be when it's like in the engine, right? Like in the actual game engine. If you have a transparent material, you would need to keep that in mind then. Yep. Exactly. Did you tell me how to decide if your edges need to be straightened when it is too much deformed? You have this example here though, right? That's the rope. That's, I'm guessing, the side of the moon. 2 moons, these sections. I think if I'm thinking that these guys... Oh god. Are they actually attached? Can't really tell. It must be, right? Because they're blue. This is also a thing where I would potentially like split them up as well. Just to be sure. I know that you have a bevel on them, right? But I would split those out. But to go back to your question, straightening them out is where it makes sense, right? Like you just have to decide. You just have to decide where it makes sense. For most of it, that makes sense. I would honestly not be mad at you if you're not doing it on a lot of stuff here. The rope, definitely. That's an easy one. Some of these cylinders, like that makes sense to me as well. So for example, here, right? If you have like a couple of these cases, I would honestly straighten this guy. Straighten these. This, I'm not sure where that shape is coming from, but potentially all this stuff, but that's pretty much straightened out already. This guy as well. That's what I would straighten out. And then the rest of it, where it kind of has like a little bit more of like an organic shape, I would just leave those. Kind of like you did here. Right? So it seems like most of it is like in good shape. Yeah, I think you did a good job. I think you did. Trying to keep track of like the different things you sent me. I don't think these are relevant. Oh no. The V shape is a metallic part at the top of the key. Just the top surface, you mean, right? Yeah, but that's fine. I would potentially break off. Yeah, like you're doing it here. This is perfect. You're gonna get like a little bit of distortion anyway. Usually it's fine, right? You just need to make sure that like the most egregious parts, you just have to check a little bit. I think you're in a pretty good position. Well, let's see. Would have some advices about what you think so far about the UV unwrap. The only thing that I can say, apart from the splitting off like certain sections, right, like these guys, is filling up this space. That needs to be filled up. Thank you for the sub. Appreciate it. And welcome to the community. So yeah. That's the main thing. You need to fill this up. Because that is like a big waste of performance at the moment. This almost means that you could honestly make this into There's a problem with the scale of the island, and I don't know how to fix it and fulfill the empty space. So there are some add-ons, right? Like UV Packer. Most of them are called like that, where it's just like it's just gonna maximize your UV space, right? Oh, hello, please. Oh, okay. Thanks, I guess. Average island scale. I think that's a completely different thing. What I want you to do is pack islands. Or it might be, I don't know. I've never used that actually. It might be the same thing, but what I want you to do is like an add-on like this. Like an add-on like this will just look at all the stuff that you have, and it will like scale it up uniformly and then try to pack it in like the most optimal way inside of your UV. If average island scale does the same thing, I don't think it does though. Because I think average island scale is just like a button you press that you just want to like average them all out, right? By islands, group them. So packing islands will like try to maximize the amount of space that they occupy in the 0 to 1 space, right? In your UVs. So look into UV Packer and just pack your islands, because the hierarchy goes from UV space maximization, right, to textile density. I could make it more complex, but do not do this, right? You should not do this really. In this specific case, you are getting really close to occupying 50% of the UV space. So what you could technically do is make this a 2x1 texture. Again, I'm just giving you the information. I don't necessarily want you to do this, right? Like a 2x1 texture means that we're no longer using a square texture, but we're just gonna get it in half, and we're only gonna use like this side. Which means that, for example, with this guy, it's a 256 by 512 texture. Because it is so close to 50%, you could just like scale things down a little bit and like squish it in there, and you have like your texture at your resolution that you want. Is just gonna be a little bit of a weird layout. But again, I wouldn't do this because this is gonna have like weird ramifications for you along the line. So I wouldn't necessarily do that. Mike P coming in with the deeds, saying what padding you should use is depending on the texture size. Yes, it is, like Mike is saying. Thanks, Mike. Yeah. Cool stuff. Stuff Moonlight. Thank you for the questions. Yeah, nearly there. Nearly at the fun stuff. Yeah, keep it up. Darkon, let's see. Some questions for this week. Would it be better to create the water material itself, or use someone else's? I would honestly, at this point, use someone else's. Very straight and to the point feedback, but water is difficult. Yeah, that's the way that I would do it. Because you're missing a lot of depth fade, and like you kind of want to have like the edges like fade in nicely, and you kind of want to have like layering in depth and color variation, all that kind of stuff. You can set that up yourself, but there's no point, right? There's no real point unless you have like a real interest of only doing materials. Then I would look into water, but then you're easily doubling your time frame to make it look really nice, right? Because that is tricky. Like setting up a good water material is tricky. So I would just straight up use someone else's. Hello, Darkon. As for the background light, the breakage of the support clamps definitely seems off. Is there anything that I can do to match it? Oh, sorry. Lol, looks like I wasted a day doing water in mine. Yeah. Usually. So that's where it gets really tricky, right? With the stuff that I was saying before, like just having like a body of water, like the thing that you did, that's like the easy part. You get it to that point, Luke. But if you then want to have like interaction with the shore and like all that kind of stuff, it just goes nuts in the complexity. So that's why like I keep referring to that specific concept as being like really tricky, because if you want to make it look good, that's the stuff that you want to be doing. And it's not easy. It really isn't. Even just making like a convincing looking water material that looks appropriate for the region of the world as well, right? That comes into play too. That is tricky. Let's see. What was the question here again? I forgot. The breakage in the support clamps definitely seems off. Is there anything that I can do to match the feel for it? Oh, let's have a look. This is a cool screenshot as well. The breakage seems off. Let's have a look. So I think what might be missing is you only did like a small section of it, where if you look at the reference, it seems like it's like extruded like all the way out. So they're actually like pieces of wall that are coming in. Right? If we really look at some of these frames, like you can really see that like it's a long extended wall with like a flat panel of light coming from the back. Right? Where in your case you just have like a little support bracket. So that might be something to look into. Just like extrude this like all the way out and then push the lights out as well. Because what they're doing is they have these long extruded walls with like a light panel at the back, because it kind of gives like a nice bounce light effect to the whole environment, right? Getting a little bit technical, but like one of the a common technique is that you could shine a light to like a white piece of paper, right? Or like a reflection piece of paper or something like that. And that's going to give you like a nice diffuse light instead of like a harsh light, right? That's why you have things called soft boxes and all that kind of stuff. So this might be a way to like diffuse the light coming in. Yeah, it's definitely longer than just a few blocks. For sure. What else is there? It seems that the light break is only present in one set of photos and not the final movie screenshots, because I don't see it on the other screenshots I provided. I think for the set photo they present, due to how much the set was designed. Any thoughts? You just have to make a decision, right? That's what it comes down to. Like, you have to decide what looks the best and then pick one of them. How about the tub? Are the materials looking okay for that? Again, it's the same thing that we talked about with the floor, right? You need to apply the feedback that we said about the floor to here as well. Like, you have done like a basic pass now, but I want to see like more specific details coming on top of it, right? The stuff that we talked about where you have the dirt along the bottom, you have the dirt along the sides here, and then maybe you have, because this is like water, so have a look at like how water is like dripping off of here, right? Like all that kind of stuff. I kind of want to see those things, right? Where it's like interacting with the surface, and what's a good way of saying this? It's, you want to make sure that the elements in your environment are like reacting to each other. Because right now it just feels like this tub is just like plonk, and then we put some water in there, plonk, and it's just like they don't really mesh together, right? You want to have that interaction between multiple surfaces to be readable, right? And there's like a base pass here, but you can really push that to like the next level if you wanted to. Shit. You always want to see the layering in all the materials, right? And it's thinking about like, it's thinking about interaction, right? Like how people are using this, and also just like environmental effects, right? And how does the material of it react to it as well? That's always something to keep in mind. Thank you for the feedback. No worries. Great looking progression. I think, honestly, the main thing is just the water, right? If we get the water to look good, I think we're in a really good spot. Yeah. Best of luck with that, Archon. And thank you for sharing your work again. Appreciate it. Joe Bates is up next, and then after that we have George. See, where's Joe Bates? Was wondering what the best way for texturing would be after modeling work on the main bridge. My current plan is to use trims and tiling textures plus POM decals for the ornamental bits, and then probably use vertex painting RGB masks with more decals on top. Is that the correct method? Yeah, it seems like that's what you're using for the rest of your environment as well, right? So that makes sense. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I was looking at my old screen. Yeah, that makes total sense to me. I think that's a good way of approaching this. The approach is solid. I just noticed this though. That would be so nice to break things up, right? Where you have that little like drainage canal and like the drainage pipe like running through the whole thing. That here as well. That could add like a little bit of like uniqueness to this and just make it stand out, right? So that could be a nice little detail there, Joe. You got some good ref, you know? Keep paying attention to the ref. I think using the trim sheets as a base and then just adding all the layers on top of it, that could work like really nice. Just make sure that you kind of hit that really grimy look, right? Because from what I can tell, it's like you're going really subtle with it at the moment. Really, this is like a general tip, right? Is you want to always push stuff to the extremes. You go from like extreme and then you dial it back. That's the way that I usually do things as well, because doing like incremental changes, like that's gonna take a long time. Whereas like if you want to get something done, like if you want to just try something out, you push it like really far and then you're like, okay, this was really too far, and then just dial it back like 70%. Because otherwise you're just gonna keep pushing it up like 5%. Oh, maybe we can do a little bit more. 5%. It's just a quicker way to get to like the end result. So yeah, keep that in mind, Joe. Yeah. Keep it up. Gonna be a cool little scene. And yeah, those little details, right? Like pay attention to those because they're gonna be freaking awesome to incorporate. Yeah. Thanks for sharing your work, Joe. And then last but not least, we have George over here. Nice little update from George. Switched to Lumen, added some vertex painting, added some wobbliness, made some new props. I started with the paint with light approach and added some lights to accentuate light bounces and highlights. Yeah, nice. Let's see. I would love some critique on the lighting and the color grading. I'm honestly not the best person to ask for that straight up. But I like it. You know, I like the way that it feels. It's very much like reminiscent of like the goals that you have set for yourself, right? Like Overwatch. What was the other one? Overwatch and Valorant. Definitely giving me like Overwatch vibes though. I would also love some advice on how to improve my set dressing, as I fear that I added too many props. If I add too many props, the scene would start to feel noisy. You are right. Right, that can definitely happen. You just need to make sure that you cluster them in certain areas. So, for example, this little area that you've been working on, you have like a bunch of props here, right? But it probably makes like it has a bigger impact where you can say like, hey, I'm just gonna cluster everything together. So like these boxes, for example, I'm just gonna add like a stack of boxes here. Well, maybe not there actually. Maybe where would they make sense? I would honestly add them here, right? Instead of the plan. Just have like a couple boxes here because that's a delivery for this place, right? I'm assuming. And then you could move this little section up where you have like chair, maybe like another chair, little table. And then the only thing that you want to do is make sure that like some of the other sections where you maybe have like a plant, maybe you remove this one. And this is something that you have to try, right? Because then you're opening up this section. And then you're pushing all the details into like certain areas, right? So you could have What a good way of doing this. If you have like a top-down overview. Let's say you have like your house here. Right, and then you have like your little terrace here. What else is happening? So you have like a little... Let's do your little staircase. Do your little staircase. And the rest of it is kind of up for grabs, right? So we currently have that. We have here, and then we have like a plant pot here, plant pot here. And then we have like crate and crate over here. Right, and then there's like a bike here as well. It's not too busy overall, but it would probably make more sense if we start clustering things together, right? So my proposal was something like this. You kind of have like all your crates in this corner. And then you leave like some open space, and then you just have like your table here, remove the plant here, and then maybe have like a plant here, right? So what we're trying to do is I'm trying to cluster everything together in a space where it kind of makes sense, right? I know this is like a really shitty example because, first of all, the circles are not the same. But hey, hopefully it's getting the point across. So clustering helps readability of the scene, right? So what could be like another example, right? I think this area is pretty nice. Some of this stuff could definitely like use like a little bit more plants, right? So for example, you have like a bunch of cool plants. You could like stack a bunch of them up here. That would be fine. Right, so that you're increasing the intensity of the plants at a certain point. And also maybe this person is just like a really big fan of plants, right? So maybe they're doing that. Maybe there's like plants up here as well. Right? And then the rest of it becomes like... At this point, I think the changes I make are just minimal. Yeah. 100%. 100%. That's what we're getting at, right? Like, at this stage, it is going to be minimal. And at a certain point, you just have to be like, okay, this is all that I can do. Right? Do like the minimal amount of stuff, and then you're good. But you can definitely like spice things up, right? With like sort of you already have. Adding like more plants to things, right? And then maybe this is your cluster, and then this is going to be empty. But that's in general a way to look at things, right? So there are some other constraints, especially if you're working for like a competitive game, right? Do you want to have those on your portfolio? Because, for example, what could be a good example? Most of it is pretty decent, but it's really tiny and annoying stuff like this, where, for example, this guy over here, a player can get stuck behind it, right? Because this is like a blocker to get them from going around the corner, right? I wouldn't necessarily pay attention to it, my opinion on that, because I feel like that stuff is... It could be potentially good to show, but most of that stuff is set out by level design, right? So you won't really you're gonna be aware of it, or like made aware of it, like on the job. That's the way that I feel about it. Having awareness of it earlier makes sense, right? But I wouldn't necessarily build your environment around it. But yeah, you can definitely add more props. You just have to think about, maybe another rule that we can look at is the 70-30 rule, right? Where you want 70% rest and 30% detail. Right? Very common, especially in like sci-fi design, for example, where if you have like a plate, right, like a panel, let's say, just like a really interesting way of making like that panel stand out is that you try to locate like most of the details in like an area where it kind of makes sense, right? So now instead of like trying to make the whole panel like really important, we kind of just structured like, this is where people are going to focus, right? Like this is the detail part. And then this can only be detail because the rest of it is not, right? And the same thing can also be applied to environments as well. I'm definitely having trouble on when to call this project done. If that is a thing that you struggle with, what I would say is give yourself a limited amount of feedback. So the way that I would approach this is, let's say you know that you're getting close to the end, right? So what I would say now is go to like a handful of people that you want some feedback from. Let them name everything that they want as feedback. Pick the stuff that you want to implement, and after that, it's done. It's a way of like externalizing like that choice, right? Because otherwise you're just gonna keep on going. So yeah. A handful of people that give you feedback. And then after that is done, you're done. And then still take time for like your presentation and like make everything like really nice and jazzy, right? But yeah. To me, you're getting really close to the finish line anyway. Because this is looking great. Yeah, cool. I hope that was helpful, George. Thank you so much for showcasing this off. Like, this is a beautiful environment, like I was saying, right? I think also that Guillaume said, like, your body is getting vitamins just by watching this gorgeous environment. It is. And I think it was also like a really nice way of just like ending tonight's stream with just like a beautiful environment on the background. So it's been way over time. Thanks again, George, for being here. Thanks for showcasing your work, and thanks everyone else for being here too. I am gonna peace out, and I'm just gonna chill a little bit for tonight. And then I will see you not next week, because next week I am actually at Gamescom. So if anyone is there, feel free to get in touch with me, and I'd love to meet up. But otherwise, I will be back the week after. So thanks so much for being here. I will see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye. Let's sleep. That's actually a good idea. I need to take a shower first, though. Have a good night, everybody.